Welcome to Life Stories, where the line between justice and vengeance is never as clear as it seems. What would you do if your child was being broken in silence, every bruise overlooked, every insult ignored, by a system that claimed to teach discipline and honor? Today's story isn't just about fists or belts. It's about two brothers, a father with a past, and the quiet war waged in a world that rewards silence over truth. It's about what happens when you stop waiting to be saved and start fighting back in ways no one sees coming. Stay with us, because what begins as a lesson in self-defense turns into something much deeper, something that could change the way you see strength, power, and belonging. Now let me take you to a quiet suburban town where two boys walked into a dojo and walked out as something no one expected. The heavy bag in the Carter family garage groaned under each strike, its thick seams trembling from a rhythm that hadn't existed 6 weeks ago. Jaden Carter, sweat glistening under the overhead bulb, threw a brutal left hook, followed by a short elbow that cracked into the leather like bone on bone. He paused just long enough to wipe his forearm across his brow, casting a glance at his twin brother, Jordan, who was drilling footwork patterns in the corner with silent intensity. No music played. No one spoke. Only breath and discipline filled the air. Their mother thought they were finishing homework. Their father had told her nothing more than, "They need this." But beneath the ordinary hum of suburbia, under the soft glow of Rivergate's street lamps, a war was being waged no one wanted to admit existed. 2 months ago, Jaden and Jordan were just two black kids trying to earn yellow belts at Iron Valley Dojo, a predominantly white martial arts school nestled between a Trader Joe's and a coffee shop where everyone knew everyone's business. They had come with wide eyes and eager hands, hoping to learn. Instead, they were taught pain. Sensei Howard, with his salt and pepper ponytail and self-proclaimed traditional values, praised discipline while ignoring the bruises the boys took from Bryce Hamilton and Trevor Scott, both 17, both sons of donors, both black belts who walked like they owned the mat. What started as subtle digs, "You're flexible for your size," or "You're quick for someone like you," became vicious. During partner drills, the twins were kicked harder than the curriculum allowed, their guards broken down not with correction, but with contempt. One day, Bryce laughed loud enough for the parents in the viewing gallery to hear. Monkeys can't learn martial arts, they just mimic. That night, Jaden didn't cry, neither did Jordan. But something shifted. Their father, Thomas Carter, a decorated veteran turned construction foreman, saw the bruises, the silence, the shame neither son could name. He didn't ask. He simply opened the garage and said, "If the system won't protect you, I will." Now, every night after dinner, the garage became a battlefield. No kata, no bowing, just real unfiltered combat drills. "Speed, surprise, violence of action," Thomas would bark. That's what wins in the real world. Jaden's fists blurred again against the bag. Jordan timed his pivot into a low-angle elbow, landing it with surgical precision. Their bodies had changed. So had their minds. The garage was no longer a place of retreat. It was a forge. They weren't training to win medals. They were training because their very place in that dojo had been declared a mistake. And yet, they hadn't told anyone. Not their mother, not the other students, not even the coach at school who noticed Jordan limping down the hallway and asked if he needed to sit out practice. Because this wasn't about sympathy. It was about becoming dangerous enough that sympathy would never be necessary again. Their father's voice broke the silence. "Tournaments in 3 weeks. Open division." He tossed a flyer onto the workbench. "You sure you want this?" Jaden didn't hesitate. "They think they know who we are. Time to show them who they're not." Jordan looked at the flyer longer. The bold print read, "Rivergate Open, all levels welcome." Underneath, "Ranked by skill, judged by spirit." He swallowed. "We beat them there. It's public. There's no going back." "They made it public the day they put their hands on you," Thomas said quietly. "They just thought no one would ever fight back." And so the secret deepened. At Iron Valley, the twins resumed their roles as quiet yellow belts, enduring another few weeks of bruises and whispered slurs disguised as coaching. But they were no longer reactive. They absorbed, measured, calculated. They watched how Trevor favored his right leg during transitions, noted how Bryce overcommitted on his left jab when he was angry, and they waited. Then came Friday. It was the end of class. The mats had been rolled up, the bags stored. Sensei Howard stood chatting with Bryce and Trevor, his laughter too loud, his praise too generous. Jordan and Jaden were tying their shoes by the door when they heard it. They won't last. Some people just don't belong in this kind of environment, Bryce said, his voice clear as glass. They're used to the streets, not structure. Trevor added, give them a basketball, not a belt. Jaden froze. Not because it hurt, but because of what he saw. His father, outside, at the window, listening. Thomas Carter didn't move. He didn't barge in. He just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, jaw tight. He made eye contact with Jaden just once and nodded. That night, no training took place. Instead, the twins sat at the kitchen table while Thomas paced the living room in silence. The television flickered, muted on the local news. The story was mundane. The silence was not. Finally, Thomas said, you know there are lines you cross where things can't go back. Jaden met his father's eyes. We crossed it the first day we didn't speak up. Jordan added quietly, we just didn't realize it until now. Thomas turned off the TV. Then we finished what we started. What happens when the people who claim to teach honor are the ones hiding behind tradition to protect cruelty? Would you stand up when the system is designed for you to stay silent? Because at the Rivergate Open, the Carter twins aren't just fighting for medals, they're fighting for truth. Jordan couldn't breathe. The air inside the locker room of the Rivergate Community Center was thick, thicker than nerves, thicker than sweat. He stared at his reflection in the mirror above the metal sink. His yellow belt looked absurd now, like a child's costume, like something fragile pretending to be armor. His hands, wrapped tightly in tape, trembled, not from fear of the fight, but from what the fight might change inside him. Jay, he said without turning, what if we lose? Jaden was sitting on the bench, lacing his shoes with methodical calm. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flicked up sharply. Then we lose on our terms. Jordan nodded slowly, but the knot in his chest didn't loosen. Because deep down, it wasn't just about losing. It was about what victory would cost. Ever since their father began training them in the garage, Jordan had felt something growing in him. Not power, but something darker. A readiness to hurt back. A cold, focused anger that was hard to separate from justice. It made his punches cleaner, his decisions faster. But it also made him sleep lighter. Think differently. Sometimes he wondered if he was becoming the very thing they had been fighting against. Outside the locker room, the tournament roared to life. Spectators filled the bleachers, competitors stretched in mirrored corridors, and coaches adjusted jazz with barking encouragement. It was a sea of nervous energy. But Jordan and Jaden moved through it like ghosts, unnoticed, unassuming, until the announcer called their names. That's when everything changed. When Jordan stepped into the ring to face Trevor Scott, the silence that fell over the Warriors Path crowd was almost physical. The murmurs began. He's a yellow belt? This has to be a mistake. Trevor smirked with all the comfort of a rich boy who'd never been punched by someone with nothing to lose. He made a show of loosening his shoulders, rolling his neck, bouncing on his heels like it was a warm-up round. The referee gave the signal. Trevor struck first. A textbook spinning kick, flashy and fast, but Jordan wasn't there. He'd already slipped past the arc, stepping inside like a shadow, delivering a compact hook to Trevor's ribs that stole his breath. The crowd gasped. Trevor staggered, more in shock than pain. Jordan didn't press. He didn't gloat. He just reset. And for the first time in his privileged life, Trevor felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The match ended in under 2 minutes. Jaden's fight against Bryce went similarly, but colder. Bryce fought with fury, wounded pride disguised as aggression. His strikes came wild, heavy, and telegraphed. Jaden barely moved. He didn't need to. Every counter was deliberate, exact. When he dropped Bryce with a sweep that made the floor shake, you could hear the belief drain out of the crowd like air from a balloon. The Carter twins had arrived, but it wasn't over. As they walked off the mat, victorious, the applause ringing in their ears, something in Jordan twisted. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even relief. It was hollowness. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt like he'd broken something sacred inside himself. Maybe it was the cold look he'd given Trevor before the final blow, or the way he hadn't hesitated when he saw Bryce's knees buckle. There had been no mercy in that ring, only efficiency, and something about that terrified him more than losing ever could. Then came the ambush. In the hallway behind the gym, as the boys grabbed their gear, Bryce and Trevor appeared, bloodied, furious, desperate. No coaches, no referees, just two broken egos clawing for a way to feel whole again. "You think you're better than us?" Bryce snarled, blood still crusted under his nose. "You humiliated us." Jaden moved forward first. "You humiliated yourselves." That was all it took. Trevor lunged. Jordan's reflex kicked in, an elbow to the chest, a pivot, a counter. But this wasn't sparring. This was real, messy, dirty. Jaden and Bryce hit the ground hard, rolling over benches and duffel bags. It was ugly and fast. Jordan fought not just with skill, but with instinct sharpened by weeks of training that wasn't about trophies. It was about survival. When tournament staff arrived and dragged them apart, Bryce had a dislocated shoulder. Trevor couldn't stand, but the damage that mattered wasn't physical. It came later. When Sensei Howard approached their father with a trembling voice and forced smile, asking for understanding. When the tournament director cited both Bryce and Trevor for unsanctioned violence and banned them from competition. When angry parents from Warriors Path gathered around to whisper about favoritism, sabotage, and how those boys had clearly been trained elsewhere. That night, in the Carter kitchen, the boys sat across from their father. Thomas Carter didn't speak. He didn't lecture. He simply placed two letters on the table. Expulsions. From Iron Valley Dojo. Not Bryce. Not Trevor. Jaden and Jordan. It was Jordan who broke the silence. We did what we were taught. Thomas looked at his sons, his jaw tight. You did more than that. Jaden stared at the letter in disbelief. They're punishing us for winning. No, Thomas said. They're punishing you for how you won. Jordan swallowed hard. We fought clean. Thomas nodded, but not quietly. And in that moment, the deeper truth came into view. The world they were navigating wasn't just about skill or even respect. It was about not upsetting the balance, about knowing your place. And the Carter boys had proven they didn't belong in the shadows anymore. Is it still justice if it makes you look like the villain? Would you sacrifice your peace to shake the foundation of a broken system? Because now that the twins had shattered the silence, the backlash was only beginning, and not even their father could see where it would end. The front porch light flickered softly as Jaden sat on the steps, his hoodie pulled tight around his head despite the late spring air. Inside the Carter house, the hum of the dishwasher and the faint echo of a news anchor's voice painted a scene of suburban calm. But nothing felt calm anymore. Not after the letter. Not after the silence that followed it. The expulsion wasn't just from the dojo. It was from the world they had fought so hard to prove they belonged in. The official reason cited unsanctioned behavior and disruption of community standards. Unofficially, it was clear. Iron Valley didn't want trouble. And the Carter twins, in winning the way they had become trouble. Jaden had always thought justice would feel like a sunrise, like warmth breaking through. But this felt more like fog, like something had ended, but nothing had started to take its place. Jordan stepped out and joined him, handing him a bottle of water. "Mom's asleep," he said. "Dad's still in the garage. Hasn't said a word in an hour." Jaden took the water without a word. "You think we went too far?" Jordan asked, not looking at his brother. Jaden didn't answer right away. He watched a car roll slowly down the street, headlights skimming across trimmed lawns and quiet mailboxes. "I think we did what we had to." "Yeah," Jordan whispered, "but I don't know if I like who we had to be." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of unspoken fear, of questions with no answers. And still, beneath all of it, a slow-burning pride. They hadn't broken. They hadn't folded. But at what cost? The next morning, Thomas Carter sat at the dining table with his sons across from him. A stack of printouts sat in front of him, news articles, Facebook posts, tournament footage that had gone semi-viral. The story had spread far beyond Rivergate. Everyone had an opinion. Some called the boys heroes. Others called them dangerous. Some praised their courage. Others whispered about controlled rage. Thomas looked older than he had in months. His military calm had fractured in places. "I wanted to teach you to defend yourselves," he said slowly. "Not to be weapons." Jaden leaned forward. "Then maybe the world needs fewer weapons and more people who know when to use them." Jordan's voice was quieter. "We were supposed to build character, but all we built was a reputation." Thomas's eyes softened. "You built more than that. You built truth, and truth always costs something." The doorbell rang. At first, no one moved. They had learned to be cautious. But when Thomas opened the door, he found not hostility, but something unexpected. Sensei Howard. He looked smaller without the gi, just a man in khakis and a collared shirt, shoulders tight with discomfort. "I owe you boys an apology," he said, voice rough. "I let things happen in my dojo that I should have stopped. I told myself it was discipline, structure. But I see now it was something else." Jaden's mouth tightened. "You saw it. You just chose not to see us." Howard nodded slowly. "That's true." He reached into his coat pocket and handed over a sealed envelope. "The Martial Arts Council contacted me. They're starting an initiative, anti-bullying outreach in schools and dojos. They're looking for student representatives. They asked for your names." Jordan blinked. "Why us?" "Because the world's watching now, and it needs to see something different. Not just fighters, leaders." Howard looked at Thomas. "And if you're willing, I'd like to donate the rest of my equipment to someone who can actually teach what I couldn't." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. But it was a start. Weeks passed. The twins trained with a new instructor, Master Alvarez, a first-generation Mexican-American veteran who ran a modest dojo across town that welcomed anyone with respect. There were no mirrors, no expensive logos, just sweat, humility, and truth. Jordan found his rhythm again. He began helping younger students, teaching them how to breathe through pain, how to move with purpose. Jaden worked more with the teens, the quiet ones, the angry ones. He taught them to use their power like a shield, not a sword. One evening, after a class where the twins had quietly coached a nervous boy through his first sparring match, Thomas watched from the sidelines, arms crossed. "You boys made it through hell," he said softly as they packed up. "And somehow, you brought back a map." Jordan looked at him. "You still think we lost something?" Thomas nodded. "Yeah, you lost the idea that people like you would ever be treated fairly without a fight." Jaden exhaled. "Maybe that's what makes us fighters." Later that night, as the three of them stood in the garage-turned-gym, Thomas reached for an old wooden box. Inside was a worn black belt, its threads faded, its history silent. He held it out. "This was mine. Iraq, Afghanistan. 6 years in the mud and blood. I used to think it made me strong." Jaden stared at it, unmoving. "But real strength," Thomas said, looking at both his sons, "is what you carry when no one sees it. What you choose when no one claps." Jordan stepped forward and helped Jaden tie it around the heavy bag. Not on their waists, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A scar turned into a symbol. Weeks turned into months. The Carters were no longer anonymous. Schools invited them to speak. Dojos asked them to train. Bryce and Trevor? No one heard much. Some said their families moved. Others said they transferred to private academies out of state. But the twins didn't ask. Some stories don't need sequels, because theirs had found its ending. Not in revenge, not even in victory, but in resilience. In the quiet strength of choosing who to become, even after the world told them who they weren't. What did this story mean to you? Share your thoughts about the Carter twins' journey and how it resonated with you. Comment 100 if this story moved you. Where are you watching from today? Share this story with a friend who needs a reminder of what real strength looks like. Thank you for watching Life Stories.